So today I'm going to be reading chapter 1 from my memoir in full color, Finding My Place in a Black and White World. And I thought it'd be fitting to read this chapter, just kind of how it all began in the beginning of my life, because it's been about a week since my birthday. This is still November, my birth month, so I wanted to just share that with you. For those of you who have not yet picked up a copy of my memoir, it's available on Amazon and also at your local library or at Barnes & Noble. It's also available at my website, racheldolezal.com, if you would like a signed copy. So I sign copies and will write a little note to you or somebody you're gifting the book to if you order it through my website. So I'm just going to read to you chapter 1, and some of you may have already read this book, and hopefully it is a treat to kind of hear a chapter in my own voice. For those of you who have not yet read the book, maybe it'll make you interested a little bit in finding out what's next. So to continue and pick up chapter 2, you'll have to find the book. So chapter 1, Delivered by Jesus. We don't get to choose our parents. Mine, Larry and Ruthann Dolezal, met while petitioning the high school principal in Libby, Montana to set aside a place on campus for students to pray during their lunch breaks. Larry had become a fundamentalist Christian after jumping into a van full of Christ-loving hippies heading west. The van took him from his childhood home in Montana to a commune in Seattle where he walked the streets and tried to convince others to love the Lord as much as he did. Ruthann's religious fanaticism was passed down to her directly from her grandfather, the pastor of an Assembly of God church in Nampa, Idaho. Ruthann's brother, my Uncle Ben, had a prayer van with supernatural house calls painted on the side, which he and his wife used to cruise around northwestern Montana while attempting to heal the sick and, in some cases, raise the dead through spiritual warfare. In short, my family was overflowing with what people in the mid-70s called Jesus freaks. After getting married, my parents bought 23 acres of land just west of Troy, Montana, on the side of a mountain with a view of the Kootenai River meandering through the valley below. While they were clearing the land and building the house I grew up in, they lived in a teepee made from wooden poles Larry had fashioned from trees he'd felled and canvas Ruthann had stitched with a 1870s treadle sewing machine. Whether they were still living in the teepee or in a house under construction at the time of my birth remains a topic of debate in my family, but either way, my childhood environment was very nearly the definition of rustic. As part of their Christian fundamentalism, Larry and Ruthann were young earth creationists, a group that believes the earth and all living things on it were created by God over a 6-day period between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, that dinosaurs were among the creatures on Noah's Ark, and that all of us are descended from Adam and Eve. Larry and Ruthann also believed that since Adam and Eve didn't have an obstetrician or midwife, they didn't need one either. Just as he'd done with my brother Josh, who was born 2 years before I was, Larry took it upon himself to deliver me on November 12, 1977, without any medical personnel or assistance on hand. As a result, Ruthann almost died from excess hemorrhaging. On my birth certificate, Jesus Christ is listed as the attendant to my birth. I would continually be reminded throughout my childhood just how difficult my delivery had been for my mother. That I'd nearly killed her weighed me down with a sense of guilt I could never fully shed. Compared to mine, Josh's birth had been a piece of cake, or so I was told. It quickly became clear to me that in our family, Josh was the blessed child, while I was the cursed one. This distinction even made itself known in my name. Many readers of the Bible only see Rachel's virtuous aspects. She was beautiful, beloved by her husband Jacob, and blessed to have 2 children, Joseph and Benjamin, who were ancestors of the 12 tribes of Israel. But Rachel was also a human illustration of the consequences of sin. Angry at her father Laban for tricking her husband into marrying her sister, like many aspects of the Old Testament, it's complicated. Rachel stole her father's teraphim, which were idols that represented household deities and served as a form of title deed, hid them in the saddlebags inside her tent, then took a seat on top of the bags. When Laban came looking for the teraphim, Rachel lied and said she couldn't stand up because she was menstruating. Meanwhile, ignorant of the fact that his wife had taken the idols, Jacob issued a curse on whoever was in possession of them. Rachel died in childbirth soon afterward. Oh, the Bible and its curses. One of the best known occurs in Genesis 9 and involves Noah, his son Ham, and a very drunken night. After Ham visits his father's tent and finds him highly intoxicated and completely naked, Ham tells his brothers Shem and Japheth, who cover their father with a garment while averting their eyes. Noah responded by condemning Ham's son Canaan to a life as a servant of servants. And most curses in the Bible are generational, which means Noah was censoring all of Ham and Canaan's descendants as well. Although race is never mentioned in the passage, an error in translation, some interpreted Ham to mean dark or black, engendering the idea that Noah had cursed all black people, and by the 18th century, this interpretation was being used to justify racism and slavery in the United States. The idea that black people are victims of the so-called curse of Ham, that they actually deserve to be treated poorly, remains embedded in our collective psyche to this very day. That I too was somehow cursed was imparted to me before I could even speak. I nearly killed Ruth Ann as she labored to deliver me. That my hair at birth was almost black and my skin was much darker than my parents' and my brothers' was a great source of anxiety for Larry and Ruth Ann, and added to the notion that I was the lesser child in the family. As a child, I cried all the time, earning me the nicknames the Blue Boohoo during a winter in which I primarily wore a blue coat, and the Green Grouch, different winter, different coat. In the rare moments I wasn't crying, I was running, moving, and dancing, which, because I was female and being raised in a stoic Christian household, were equated with sinning. I was told that if I continued to act that way, living by the dictates of my carnal nature, I would go to hell. Whenever I misbehaved as a child, Larry and Ruth Ann reminded me of an incident that occurred when I was 18 months old. Left unsupervised in the house, I fell down the stairs that led to the unfinished basement and landed on the concrete floor at the bottom, breaking my collarbone and several vertebrae in my neck. Most parents would have rushed me to the nearest hospital with tears in their eyes. How did Larry and Ruth Ann respond? They prayed over me and took me to a natural doctor who put my arm in a sling and advised me to rest up. No x-rays were taken, no pain medications administered. My neck proceeded to grow straight instead of in a natural curve as bone spurs fused some of my injured vertebrae together. I've lived with chronic neck pain ever since. Whenever I complained about the injury when I was growing up, Larry and Ruth Ann told me the pain I was experiencing was God's way of punishing stiff-necked people, an allusion to the wayward nature of oxen, which were the most important domesticated animals when the Bible was written. Relying on these animals to plow their fields, farmers used goads, long sticks with pointed ends, to get them to speed up or turn. Despite being repeatedly and painfully stabbed, some oxen refused to obey, and as a consequence, these obstinate animals were labeled hard of neck or stiff-necked. To Larry and Ruth Ann, my neck pain wasn't a consequence of their negligence. Apparently, it was my fault as a 1-year-old that I'd fallen down the stairs because they'd instructed me to avoid doing just that, or even an actual physical injury. It was a reminder that I was too obstinate and willful for my own good, and a clear indication that I needed to submit to the will of God. That I should feel guilty for acting in a way that felt most natural to me would remain a constant theme throughout my life. And that is chapter 1, Delivered by Jesus, in my book in full color. There's also, I should add, in the center of the book, there are illustrations, there are pictures in the center of the book, and some of the pictures that correlate with that particular chapter are my birth certificate, which lists Jesus Christ as the witness to my birth, as well as the picture of the teepee that was handmade by my parents, my biological parents, and my baby picture where you can see that I was born with black hair and was darker than my older brother. So some of the pictures just kind of like relate to the subject matter in my book and hopefully help to illustrate and also kind of show a little bit of evidence and documentation of some of the narratives. So I hope you get a chance to carry on from chapter 1 into the rest of my life, and most people are familiar with the very end of the book, so now you have the beginning and you can find out what happens in between those bookends.